Should have just chaired this season.
It's the cost of admission.
Be nice to me.
I can do that.
You sit here where there's no, Jordy shows up.
Oh.
Nobody's need to sit in the back bench.
Tom, this is Jordy. I'm going to be online today. I'm supposed to be in two places at one time. It's a little difficult.
You don't have a clone?
Nope, not today.
All right, are we ready to start, Maggie?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
All right. This is Director Brzezinski, co-chair of the Drought Interagency Coordinating Group. I will call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, folks online as well. We'll start with webinar logistics, and I'll turn to Maggie to go through those.
Thank you, Director Buchatsky, and thank you all for joining us today. We ask that you remain muted unless you are speaking. If you're a member of the ICG and would like to speak, please type your name into the chat, or we will unmute you, and or you're free to unmute yourself. If you're a member of the public, please type your questions or comments into the chat. You can also unmute yourself when there's opportunity for public comment. This meeting and everything written in the chat will be recorded. This is just for public purposes, and we will be posting the recording to the ADWR YouTube page. And lastly, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please contact the ADWR help desk. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. So I don't know if Gabe Levine, the director of the Arizona Division of Emergency Management and the co-chair, is in the meeting. Gabe, are you with us? Because you probably have a few other things you're doing right now.
Yes, sir. I called in. I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll start by saying this group has met biannually since 2006 to make a recommendation to the governor about whether to maintain the drought emergency declaration, which has been in place since June of 1999. This is an advisory group to the governor composed of over 20 federal, state agencies and tribes. As in our normal course of business, we will have presentations that will help inform us as to the decision that will be before us. Again, members, to avoid speaking over one another, please introduce yourself using the chat box if you are online. Add your name and who you represent so that all the participants can see that. And so we have a record of who's speaking and who's attended the meeting. So with that, we'll start with the presentations, and we'll start with Dr. Saffold's presentation on the drought status update and monitoring technical committee activities.
Thank you. And if we can go to the next slide. I appreciate that. I'm happy to have this conversation. We'll talk about kind of an overview of what's been going on for the water year, but maybe look at what happened last year as well. So next slide, please. And I wanted to start with what happened with temperatures. We'll look at the water year, but I'll kind of review a little bit about what happened last year. If we actually look at when the last month in Arizona was below average for a temperature, that happened in January of 2025. So it's been a while since we've had above average temperatures. If we look at last year from February to September, that was the second hottest February to September on record. And then if we pop into October, November, December, you can see the temperatures that have been occurring since that time and those record kinds of temperatures. Last month, April, felt a little better. It's not included on this slide, but I wanted to make sure we understood all the way through till April. And even though this past April felt a little better than March, it was still the 12th warmest April on record. So we've had very hot temperatures through this water year and through last year. Next slide, please. And now looking at precipitation. So if we pop into last year, 2025, January to September last year, that was the 11th driest January to September on record. And that included that wet September that we had last year. And then if we start popping into this water year, so October, November, last October, we had 1.58 inches of precipitation statewide. That was 175% of normal. If we look at November, we had 1.61 inches of precipitation statewide, 190% of normal. And then popping into December to April, so the most recent December, January, February, March, and then including April, all have been below average. We've received 2.40 inches of precipitation statewide since that time, December to April. That's 46% of normal. Next slide, please. And looking at the water year, you can see we're looking at October to March on our charts and our maps. And comparing other water years, that's kind of what you're seeing right in through there. So through March on our chart, we are below average, 5.29 inches for the water year. If we add April in, we have had 5.59 inches of precipitation for the water year. That's 81% of normal. That's October to April. So you can see what's been going on, even though we've had that very wet October and November of last year, we're starting to come out of that excessive amount and moving into below average amounts. Next slide, please. And with our precipitation for snow, if we remember last November, we had a snow event that was actually substantial. It popped our SWE snow water equivalent into the 70th to 90th percentile. And you can see that in all of our basins, and you can look at what happened in the lower Colorado Basin. You can see that November just popping up. Then we entered into the hottest December on record for Arizona. There was much snow melt. Early January, we had a snow event that was significant. We started to see that pop into the 10th to 30th percentile. You can see that in the Salt and the Gila basins. That's when they had the largest amount of SWE for the water year. And then February, late February, we had another event. You can see that popping up into, again, that 10th to 30th percentile, especially in the Verde Basin, the Little Colorado Basin. That's when they had their highest median amounts. Otherwise, after that period of time and after that very hot March of this year, you can see that Arizona was in the minimum to 10th percentile for SWE. Next slide, please. And then the impacts to our short-term drought. So let's pop back again. A year ago, March 2025, that's when we started seeing the expansion of extreme and exceptional short-term drought in Arizona. May and June last year were actually wetter than normal, so that was not a bad thing. But then July and August, very hot, very dry. We saw the expansion of our short-term drought. Then we had the very wet September, October, November. That was the 9th wettest fall on record for Arizona. So we started seeing a little bit of mitigation. So you see that back and forth that we've experienced across that time frame and where we've been with our water year. And then December to April, that has been the 16th driest December to April on record. So now again, even though we had some mitigation from our very wet fall, we're starting to see that expansion again. Next slide, please. I did want to bring this up because we do talk about SPEI quite a bit when we're talking about what's been going on with our long-term drought. And to define SPEI, it's the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index. And it takes into account not just lack of precipitation, but also hotter temperatures, because hotter temperatures make a thirsty atmosphere, and those impact what happens with our long-term drought. And I did want to pull in these charts that show you what was going on, not just in Arizona, but also in the Southwest. So we're looking at the Four Corners states, that's defined here for this Southwest chart. And you can see that our long-term drought in Arizona started in 1994. If we look at the average temperature, you can see those temperatures have been increasing in that period of time. If you look at our precipitation, you can see that precipitation, some years are good, but for the most part have been below average. And then next slide, please. Looking at our long-term drought maps, taking into that average SPEI that goes with 24, 36, and 48 months, you can see the last year, looking at our charts, we're seeing that expansion of those long-term deficits. And because we do look at that 48-month SPEI quite a bit when we're looking at our long-term drought maps, I did want to pull in the 48-month rankings for the state of Arizona. And it's been the hottest for the past 48 months, looking at that April 2022 to March 2026, so that 48-month record. And then looking at how dry it's been, the 27th driest, looking at from April to March. So definitely been a deficit that we're still seeing with our long-term drought maps. Next slide, please. And happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Any question first from members around the table? Seeing none. Gabe and folks online, any questions or comments? Hearing none. Thanks, Dr. Saffel. We'll move on to agenda item 4, the weather outlook for 2026, and Mark O'Malley will run us through that presentation. Mark.
Thank you, Director Bishotsky, and we'll get going here. Unfortunately, we left last fall and it was somewhat positive with a lot of good rainfall and soil moisture. And we essentially turned off the spigot after that. And it's been, as Erin showed, pretty poor. So let's get into this. Next slide. And I think you click one. Yeah, there we go. It's so click once more. And I want to bring 2 areas to highlight that'll show up in the circles across the equator. This is the decay of the La Nina, which was partially responsible for our very poor winter. Those blue cold colors have all disappeared very quickly and have been replaced with the warm colors, which is an emerging El Nino, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about already in the media. The other area I want to bring to up in this meeting is off the Baja of Mexico. There's a lot of warm water out there. That's actually a good sign for us. This area can be a source region for moisture during the monsoon. And with the warm water, we can more easily bring up the moisture once we get into the proper circulation pattern. Now, it might be a little delayed going in to July and August, but there are some positive effects of this warm water. Also, with the developing El Nino and this warm water in place, this will also encourage tropical development come this fall and going into the winter. And that can also help us as we start to shed tropical moisture into Arizona. There's the possibility. It's not a guarantee, but it has happened before in developing El Nino situations. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the outlook for the El Nino, and it's very high confidence, actually. Normally in the spring, we are in a predictive barrier where there's a lot of uncertainty. This year is the exception. We are looking at basically all the models that we use showing an El Nino. The magnitude is a little bit uncertain. However, go to the next slide. There is high probability. This was issued in April. I actually just got the May one this morning, and these probabilities are over 95% chance of El Nino. And there's actually better than a 65% chance that this will fall in a strong to very strong category. Now, I will warn you that strong and very strong don't necessarily mean bigger impacts for us. 2016 was a very strong El Nino. And we didn't really see that much happen in Arizona. So I will show coming up on the next maps how that the El Nino has influenced us over the past. Next slide. So this is a forecast. We'll start with the summer. And As we've seen over the past multiple summers here now, the odds are shifted towards a warmer than average summer. Click one more. And for Phoenix specifically, there's a 46% chance that will fall in the above normal category. There's still a 21% chance will fall in the below normal category. However, if you click once more, this is the trend that we've been under in the state of Arizona, July, August, September. And it's a very distinct trend since basically the past 50 years. We are warming at 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit per decade over the entire state. And click one more. Even those cool years, what I consider cool years in the mid 2010s there, those would have been one of the warmest summers back 50, 60 years ago. So this trend is certainly holding across the state. It hasn't been since 2008, 2017, since we've seen a summer near that mean of 78 degrees. And we've been several degrees above that and exceptional in 2020 and 2024. I would not expect that this trend is going to change. Next slide, please. So looking at rainfall in past emerging El Niños, there is really no good pattern. Many of these, there's areas across the state which have been extremely dry. There's a few years where there's been extremely wet areas. But in reality, this is no different than any other monsoon that we see across the state. Thunderstorms during the summer are highly variable and spatially and temporally. And this during emerging El Niños, there's really no difference. What I can say is historically during El Niños, sometimes the monsoon starts quite dry, and then we start to pick up tropical moisture later in the year during September. We can hope that that happens this year like it happened in 1997 there, but there is no guarantee that that will happen. Next slide. So looking at the probabilistic odds from the Climate Prediction Center, there is a signal among the models that we use that's picking up on that warm water off the Baja and picking up at the enhanced probability that we will see tropical activity later during the monsoon. And they paint, go ahead and click one more, a 40% chance in Phoenix that it will be above normal, but there's still a 27% chance that will fall in the below normal category. So I would not be betting a lot of money that it's going to be above normal, but the odds are stacked that way. Next slide. Next, click one more. And this shows the historical distribution of precipitation across the state during the monsoon. The circles are the weak to moderate El Niños, and the stars are the strong to very strong El Niños. There really is no discernible pattern here. They're clustered generally around the mean. The best thing I can say is during developing El Niños, we haven't seen the extreme dry years, but on the other hand, we haven't seen extreme wet years during emerging El Niños during the monsoon. So best case scenario is we're at or just above the median this year. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to cover the upper Colorado Basin as well, because that does matter for us a lot. And the distribution is more variable here. I guess the good news here is some of the wettest monsoons in the Western Colorado Upper Basin have occurred during El Niño years. Now, summer precipitation does very little for reservoir recharge. However, you can get localized side inflows and it can reduce demand locally, but I would not expect a large amount of influence, even if we do have a very wet year, other than what I will show coming up for the fall. Next slide. So I normally don't talk about the fall that much in these presentations. However, this may be very critical for us this year going into the next winter. We really need soil moisture levels to come back to where outflow or inflow, I guess, and soil and snow melt will become more efficient come spring of 2027. Now, there's a wide variety of outcomes we've seen in previous El Niños, some extremely wet, mostly associated with tropical activity, but there's been some years that have been extremely dry. So unfortunately, the odds, just looking at past El Niños, don't show much. But if you go to the next slide, there is modeling that suggests that the probabilities are, again, enhanced during the fall, that we could see above normal precipitation in the southwest. This does not necessarily extend up into the Colorado Basin. However, if you click once more, this gives the probability for Phoenix at over 45% chance. So actually going into the fall, the chances of above normal precipitation are better than we have during the monsoon. So this does give us a little bit of hope. Click once more. And this does show the historical distribution of rainfall during the October, November, December time period. And in this case, it does become more favorable for Arizona. Some of the wettest falls that we have experienced have occurred during El Niños. There have been dry falls, obviously, but none of the driest ones have occurred during El Niño. So that we hope that this trend continues, and then we can get a very wet fall leading into the winter season. Click once more. And this shows the climate, the Colorado Climate Division, a little lower distribution. And unfortunately, there has been that was back in 1977, I believe, or 76, an extremely dry fall there. That was an extremely bad winter for the basin, but there have been some fairly good falls on record for that area. So we go to the next slide. And this is where our hope really stands, is coming next winter. Unfortunately, the modeling doesn't show the shift in odds for precipitation that strong. I would have expected a stronger reflection in this seasonal precipitation outlook, but for some reason, the models aren't really picking up on it. So go to the next slide. This shows our historical events during El Niños. And unfortunately, that 2016 strong El Nino event sticks out like a sore thumb here, because all the other ones were fairly good over the past 6 El Ninos that we've seen. So the odds historically are stacked in our favor come this winter. Next slide. So this shows the historical Arizona precipitation. And again, some of our wettest winters have occurred during El Ninos, but the stars are the strong ones. And really the wettest years are not the strong El Ninos. The wettest years are actually the weak to moderate ones. There's actually the 2016 kind of sticks out as a strong, that was one of the drier winters. So the odds are shifted in our favor, but the strongs normally don't show the most amount of rain and snow, interestingly. Next slide, or go to click one more on this, show the Colorado Basin. Not as strong a reflection there. There had some of the wettest winters have occurred during El Ninos, but El Nino also can mean average or even below average precipitation in the upper Colorado Basin. So that's why in those previous slides, the chances were basically equal chances across that part of our area. Next slide. So this is just a basic summary of everything. My email's at the top if you do want to email me. But what we do have is very high confidence of El Nino developing, 65% of strong to very strong. Now that doesn't necessarily mean a lot for us, but there are enhanced chances that the summer and the fall will be wetter than average. And then we can hope that that sets the stage for a wet winter and we can have better efficient runoff, because as we will see in our upcoming presentations, the runoff this year has been quite bad. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thanks, Mark. First questions from members around the table for Mark.
Mark is.
You're not a member, but I'll let you ask anyway.
Well, that's why I raised my hand.
It's okay, go ahead.
I used to be a member. I don't know what happened. Mark, do you have any theories on 2016 as far as why that was such a dry year given the?
When I went back, there was no great attribution for it. It seemed like where the jet set up, it was further west in the Pacific, and it's tended to favor more northern California and the Sierra, and then everything lifted away from the Colorado Basin and Arizona. Typically during El Niños, you'll see Southern California and Arizona where the jet pounds into us. So there was really no great attribution on that, other than there is some randomness out there that occurs even within the climate cycle.
Thank you.
Gabe or others online have any questions? Hearing none, thanks, Mark, and we'll move on to item 5. Colorado River Water Supply Update. James Hefner from DWR will give us that presentation. Go ahead, James.
Thank you. Good morning, and apologies for any duplication of the awesome news that everyone has been getting on the climate. And next slide, please. As far as the current reservoir status, just starting here as of May 3rd, Navajo is at 62%, Blue Mesa at 43% full. Flaming Gorge, I'd say our usual bright spot, at least as of late, is 81%. That's since come down a little bit, probably about 78%. They being reclamation have been releasing water, sending it to Powell as well as environmental flows. They started releasing at the end of April. It's been ramping up and then as of late ramping back down. Powell's about 5.6 million acre feet storage, 24%, about a little over 8 million acre feet in Lake Mead, 31%. They're essentially where they were at the same time in 2022, which was, of course, that was after a dry year, not in the midst of one. Next slide, please. As for how it got here, in terms of the water year at the start, again, we had that decent shot of moisture. So I'd say in October, November, we were above the median in terms of precipitation and inflows. But since then, it was warm and dry, then it was warmer and drier, and then there was March. So we have, precipitation is tracking closer to 2021. The inflows are somewhere between 2021 and 2002. 2002 being our worst as far as water year inflows, 2021 the second lowest, second driest. Next slide, please. In terms of snowpack, clearly in record territory here. SWE in the basin has been tracking below 2002 and 2021. We peaked early in March, as we saw earlier, around 9 inches, well below the median peak. We've had some recent storm systems up there, kind of delayed the melt off a little bit since March, but no miracle maze have been, that's not happening. Geographically, no basin's been spared, no sub-basin. It's, throughout the upper Colorado, the Gunnison, the upper Crane, San Juan, they all have very similar graphs that illustrate this. The upper Crane started out a little better, but then we hit March and it's declined just like everywhere else. Outside the basin, more of the same. The Platte, the Arkansas, the Great Basin, the Sierras, they all essentially show the same portrait as far as the SWE. Next slide, please. Of course, as with snowpack, as you might expect, we're looking at record low runoff, at least in terms of the April through July. The last official forecast was 800,000 acre feet. That's below the record 964 back in 2002. In terms of water year, you will a little better, which is not saying much. The current forecast is seeing about 3.27. That's somewhere between 2.6 for 2002 and 3.5 in 2021. So it's, that record low that we're, forecast that we're seeing for April through July is at least offset somewhat by that October, November that we saw earlier. Next slide, please. Of course, finally, just the seasonal outlook, the next 3 months, more the same, essentially looking at, below normal precipitation and the Gunnison and the Green, San Juan's got equal chances. Hoping for a little bit more of that, fall precip. Anything helps later in the year. And then as far as the temperatures, it's just, and it's going to be warm. It's going to be very warm. Next slide, please. With that in mind, of course, we move into the projections. These are clearly outdated in terms of both the hydrology and the operations. But nonetheless, they still provide some useful information. I'm going to ask you to ignore the end of calendar year projection elevations on the right because they are based on, a 7.48 million acre foot release from Powell, which is not going to happen, was not going to happen when they did this study. But what you can see is if they didn't do anything to protect Powell, we would fall below Power Pool as early as July. And if they were to protect Power Pool and the only tool they had was to reduce outflows, reduce releases from Powell, then you would find us at the end of the year basically bouncing somewhere between Power Pool and 3,500 feet. And just reducing the releases by themselves, even down to 6 million acre feet, would not be enough. You'd have to release water from the upper units. Next slide, please. Again, not going to dwell too much on this one, just to point out that if they were to release 6 million acre feet, which they are, we'll be down about 1030, 1035 feet in elevation in Lake Mead. Next slide, please. Okay, along with their 24-month study, Reclamation did what they call exhibit runs. This again is part of the process documenting the need for both actions. One on the left is the probable min in the 24-month study that we saw in the earlier graphic. The one on the right is the most probable. The solid lines are just as is. The dashed lines is what happens when they release 1 million acre feet from Flaming Gorge. Gets you about 20 feet in elevation. That clearly doesn't get you past Power Pool or 3,500. You reduce releases to 6 million acre foot, I guess 6 million feet, excuse me. That would get you enough to protect Power Pool at 3,500, at least through the next water year at the minimum probable scenario. Next slide, please. And this should be my last one. And this is just, they've combined this, the two min and the most, because the only affected here, the only change is going from a 7.48 million acre foot release to a 6 million acre foot. And what you see again, we end up with about sitting around 1035 at the end of the calendar year. And with that, I think that's my last slide. If you answer any questions offline, contact information is there. And thank you.
Thanks, James. So first, questions for James from folks around the table. Not seeing any. Gabe or others online questions for James? Okay, thanks, James. We can move on to agenda item 6, Salt River and Verde River watersheds, water supply update. Stephen Flora from SRP will lead us through that discussion. Stephen.
All right, good morning. My name is Stephen Flora. I'm a senior hydrologist with SRP. A little bit of update on the salt and Verde watersheds, SRP water supply. Go to the next slide. If we remember last year, in water year 2025, where we were starting out at the beginning of this water year, we had just finished the lowest inflow we'd observed on record into the Saltano and Verde rivers and SRP reservoirs. For water year 2025, we had about 205,000 acre feet, 30% of median. So we were coming off a very dry year. The 2 years before that, we had an average year and then a very wet year in 2023. But you can see the impact of that very dry water year 2025, where we decreased from 76% to 53% during that water year. And you can see on that graph, kind of putting us back about median storage at the start of water year 26. We started with about 1.2 million acre feet in October 1st, 2025, 53%. The Verde was about 46% full and the Salt about 54%, with Roosevelt being about 44%. Cragen was also about 18%. So that's kind of where we were coming off a very dry year from the winter of 2025, a record low winter 2025 for inflow. Now, the very end of water year 2025 and the start of 2026, as Mark mentioned, started off very good, which was good news going into it. If you go to the next slide, we saw some very good precipitation events across the Salt and Verde watershed in October and November. And we saw very good response from the Salt River, particularly in October, and the Verde River, particularly in November, from those November storms up to 17,000 CFS on the Salt, 4,000 CFS on Tonto, and 12,000 on the Verde. We increased, particularly on the Verde from that November storm, we increased from that 46 to about 72% full. That allowed us to make our swap. We had delayed our river swap in the fall because of the lower elevations on the Verde. So that allowed us to make our swap to the Verde in early December to begin delivering off the Verde. Overall, in that October, November, December timeframe, 2025, we saw about 200,000 acre feet, which was over 200% of median. So it really set things up. Even early December, there were some storms out there. We were looking and potentially could, start filling up the Verde. But as Mark mentioned, it shut off. Those went away, and we didn't see much the rest of the winter. But setting up, we had very good soil moisture. We saw already runoff, so we had good runoff efficiency going in. So there was a lot of variability in what we were expecting because we had really good conditions. Basically a lot of potential on the watershed. We just didn't have any snow going into the winter yet. You can see the comparison from the previous winter, the record low 2025. We had very dry conditions going into that. So that was a better start. We had almost 7 inches going into 2026, which is about where we see much more efficient runoff at that mark. So next slide. But you can see the late December, beginning of January, that's what the watershed looked like. There was no snow up there. A lot of potential, good runoff conditions, but no snow, no water up there that we could already count on. So it was really up to what the winter, what happened in the winter. And the graphs on the left, the Verde and the Salt, those are just past the peak. So about a week or so past the peak snow amount or peak snowpack. As Aaron showed, we saw about half of median peak on the Verde and about a third of median on the Salt. You can see this is a couple days to a week past that. We did get January and then a bigger event, particularly on the Verde there in February, to add some snowpack to get us up to that half a median on the Verde. But late February, early March, it started to melt very quickly as temperatures warmed up. The good news is it was very efficient runoff, and we were seeing a lot of, for that amount of snow, we were seeing water running off into the reservoirs. The bad news was the snowpack was below normal, and we were still uncertain of what was going to happen into March. And I think we all know what happened into March. Late February, we were still kind of on that cusp of potentially having some runoff, a decent runoff year, but nothing extravagant. But what happened next? If you go to the next slide, we saw a very warm March, a very dry March. You can see in this precipitation graph from October 1st through the end of April, through late April, the watershed saw about 10 inches. We saw about normal precipitation across the Salt and Verde watershed for the fall and winter. But most of that happened, and almost 7 inches of that happened in the fall, which was really priming the watershed. Not in the winter when we get all of that runoff. We only saw just less than 3 inches, about half normal in the winter months of January, February, and March. You can see just those small events in January and then in March, late February, and then really nothing much in March and early April. So it kind of shut off, and all of that we built up, we didn't really get that runoff from it. That March time frame has been kind of make or break a lot lately in the Salt and Verde, and we didn't get it this year. So for the water year, we're about 10 inches, as I mentioned. Last year, 2025, it was 11.28. So already approaching last year's precipitation. The Verde was slightly favored than the Salt. But if we look at what that did for runoff, it really didn't help our winter runoff. We saw that little boost in the fall that helped a little bit on the Verde for storage. If you go to the next slide, you can see our January through April runoff was 20% or so on the Salt and Tonto, 56% of median on the Verde, and we saw about 135,000 for January through April, which is a third of median. 83,000 was last year, so 50,000 ahead of last year, but last year's was a record low. So that's not much. We've seen about 335,000 because we saw 200,000 in the fall. But all we saw from the winters, when we get most of it, is that small increase on the Verde from the January storm event, and then particularly on the Verde, a small increase, less than 2,000 CFS on the Verde from that late February and early March snow melt, and then really nothing through March, which has been one of our most productive runoff seasons when we have a wet winter. We just didn't see the precipitation in March to continue that momentum that the watershed had built early. You can see the difference. Last year, we actually had a fairly good March with 2.36 inches in March of 25, but it was so dry leading up to that, we didn't get any runoff from it. If we had seen that this March, we only saw 0.46 inches. If we had seen that, we would have had a much different story for this runoff here. But we had a very dry March, warm March, and we saw that kind of shut off and not get the flows we're looking for in March. Next slide. So as far as our January through May 1 through May 31st, typical winter runoff season, last year we saw in 2025, we saw the record low I mentioned of 97,000. This year we were projecting about 158,000 acre feet. So not much better, at about 35% of median. It'll probably end up closer to about 150,000 acre feet when we get to the end of the month here. It's projected to be about the 13th lowest total inflow for the Saltando Verde, with records going back to 1913. And you can see from the two graphs on the right, we didn't really add any storage to either the salt reservoirs of Roosevelt Lake, and particularly it maintained around that 43 to 45%. And then the Verde dropped from about 72 to 62% throughout the winter. Next slide. Overall, where we are at the beginning of May, the one brighter spot, I guess, is CC Cragen. We did see a good boost in the fall. It went from about 18% to 50% or so, and then in the winter got a little more up to 72%. So that's got up to almost 11,000 acre feet peak storage out of 15,000. Roosevelt, though, remained near 45 most of the winter. The Verde slightly decreased throughout the winter. We swapped from the Verde because of the dry. Once we knew it was going to be dry in early March, we swapped from the Verde to the salt to make deliveries there in the second half of March. And we are currently a little lower than this, but not much, similar to about 55% currently total storage, 54% on the salt, 62% on the Verde, with the deliveries being made out of the salt right now. Next slide. So kind of to wrap up where we are on the salt and Verde and SRP reservoirs, the watershed precipitation, while normal, most of that was in the fall, where we saw about 200,000 acre feet of runoff, which is above normal, but the very low winter brought us back below median. So total for the water year from October through May is about 74% of median. Our watershed conditions and reservoirs, we had good conditions early on, but that dried out quickly as things dried out, particularly in March, because we didn't see a lot of the runoff because of that well below normal snowpack and below normal precipitation in the winter. Our stream flow forecast, about 35% of median, reservoir capacity about 1.25 million acre feet, 55% currently. Some of those impacts, our groundwater use, we had increased it from last year to this year for 2026 to be used about 225,000 acre feet. That is likely to increase again in 2027. We're still going through the process and the planning to determine that throughout the next few months here, to determine that actual value. But we do expect that to increase slightly for groundwater use due to the drier winter we observed. Water deliveries transition to the salt in March. That'll continue through October. In October, we'll switch to the Verde. There is a Canyon Lake drawdown for maintenance that many of you are already aware of in the fall and early winter, where we'll be delivering off the Verde from mid-October through at least to January. And we'll see how things progress this fall with Mark comments on the monsoon and the El Nino going into the winter. There is some hope that we could see a more productive winter in 2027. So we will continue to plan for drought, but prepare for floods if that is the case, to manage the SRP reservoir system. And overall, just one change, some organizational updates. If you click one more time, many of you know Charlie Esther. He's the director of our water supply and planning group. He was the longtime manager of this group that I'm in, that does our hydrology and weather. He is retiring after 43 years at SRP. He has been kind of the overseas representative for SRP to the Drought ICG and Monitoring Technical Committee. He will be retiring later this month. He has been a great person to add SRP throughout the last several decades as part of this as well. So Charlie will be retiring from SRP this month. We appreciate all he's done. We will continue to plan for drought and prepare for floods at SRP, like he always said. Next slide. Our group that does that is our atmospheric science and hydrology. We've had some name changes and organizational. Tim Skarupa, our senior manager, will be kind of taking that role that Charlie had before, as kind of overseeing our weather and hydrology and drought. Myself in the watershed hydrology portion of that will continue on the drought, as well as potentially a meteorologist from our weather and climate services, the other half of our atmospheric science and hydrology group for drought. So that is our update. If there's any questions, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen, and offer my congratulations to Charlie. Obviously, I've worked with him for a very long time, most of those 43 years. So he's done a great job for all of us over at SRP. So first, folks around the table, questions for Stephen? Gabe or folks online, questions for Stephen? Right, hearing none.
No questions for me.
Thanks. We'll then move to agenda item 7. This won't be pretty. Impacts of drought on hydropower. Jordy Fuentes, Executive Director, Arizona Power Authority.
Thank you, Tom. And again, apologize for not being able to be there in person. And thank you for your reference, just barely. This is not going to be pretty. Unfortunately, this is not going to be pretty. I have a few slides, but James had already showed them. So if we can probably flip through these to if you go, I think probably 3 slides forward. Oh, so let's stop right there. Let's go back one more. Sorry. We'll start with this first one. I love this quote and the link between water and power. And I'll read it for those that maybe can't see it. We have learned over the last century that modern civilization cannot thrive in the desert without power to move water, and power cannot be generated without water. Water and power are the foundation of our technological adaptation. They're intertwined in a double helix, the DNA that facilitates our desert cities. And I think that is appropriate for the conversations that we're having here. There is a deep connection between the two. You can't have one without the other. And we're in a tough spot. So you can flip forward now. Sorry. Probably, you can pass this one more and even one more. So James showed the April 22nd actions being taken by the Bureau on operations along the Colorado River, related to releases from the Flaming Gorge, and then also reductions in releases from Lake Powell down to Meade. And what that means, though, is there's a lot to it from a hydropower perspective. So when we start cutting off water releases, the amount of, well, let me start here again. The hydropower, most of the revenues from hydropower pay for the majority of the operation costs along the Colorado River. So federal employee salaries, maintenance and operation of these things, there's a lot of environmental programs, salinity control, security, visitation. All of these things are all funded by revenues from hydropower. We've kind of backed ourselves in a corner, and we've basically used most of the tools in our toolbox, and we have very few tools left other than cut and run it down, run the lake elevations down as low as we can without causing significant harm. I will say that what I'm showing here on this slide is the Hoover Dam, the hydropower capacity, and the blue line is the existing turbines as they set today, under the assumption that they could all run down to lake elevation 950. In January of last year, the Bureau put forward a study. I'm not sure how they knew to study this or how long they've known that this was an issue, but they developed a study and shared it with us, the hydropower customers, in January, showing what would happen as lake elevations drop. Because what they're telling us is that the old turbines, hydropower turbines that are not a newer style Whitehead turbine, cannot run below right around elevation 1035. And so at 1035, there are 17 turbines at Hoover, 5 of which are Whitehead turbines. Of those 5, one is currently down for some technical issues. So we actually have 4 Whitehead turbines. So as the lake elevation drops, we get to 1035. Only those 4 Whitehead turbines are able to operate, which is what you see. This orangish colored line is the capacity, or the ability to generate power drops significantly. We're talking down from a high of the nameplate capacity on those systems is about 2,030 megawatts. When we get to elevation 1035, what we have left is 382 megawatts, which is what, 80% of the capacity is gone. 70 to 80% of the capacity is gone. Ultimately, what that means is if we hit elevation 1035, the Hoover resource will become unaffordable. The rates will be such, the way rates are set is there's a certain amount of costs, those salaries, the maintenance and operation, that are just, the costs are what they are. And that equals roughly about 100 million. So the revenues from hydropower has been paying for this and a lot of other things for quite a while. And when you only have 382 megawatts of capacity, the amount of hydropower generated and the capacity associated with that hydropower is not enough to maintain the affordability of the resource. This resource is now going to become much higher than other power resources available to everyone today. So what you'll see these hydropower customers say, no thanks, I don't want any more of that. I'm going to go buy my own power somewhere else. So we're really running into a situation where if the hydropower customers walk away, somebody's going to have to pay for this, and the federal government's going to be on the hook for paying for the operations here at Hoover. The reason why this is such a big problem and why I'm sharing it is all of the modeling that's being done now shows us dropping below 1035 in the springtime of 2017 of next year. I had a conversation with the Bureau the other day talking about conservation, cuts, things that we could do. And essentially what they told me was, yeah, you can do those things, but at the end of the day, we're going to drop below. You might be able to save a month or two. It might not go below 1035 in March. Maybe it goes in May, but ultimately it's going to drop below 1035 just because there's just not enough water. And we've seen that today in the presentations. The runoff is abysmal. Interestingly, the moisture is not that terrible, but the runoff is, and that's really what we rely on, especially in the upper basin areas, which has been hit hard this year. So that's at Hoover. That's the problem that we're seeing is the affordability of this resource is just. We're going to have to put in place some solution soon to be able to address this. And I don't know what we don't have those tools currently in our toolbox. We're going to have to develop them. In addition, if you move up to PAL, which Arizona, there's a number of Arizona entities that have hydropower allocation from the upper basin generators, and what you'll see there is with the reduction, so the 6E, the section 6E, which was a provision in the contract designed to protect elevation 3,500 at PAL, the changes that they made in operations related to that protection meant that they reduced the releases from 7.48 down to 6 million. Well, that hurts hydropower. There is a little bit of mitigation in that they're releasing power up from Flaming Gorge, but in the long term, it's a net negative. And next year, as Tom, who led the conversation yesterday in the art committee, there's a number of proposals on the table that the water releases are going to could range anywhere from 5 million to 12 million, but probably in the 5 to 7 million acre feet range. And those types of releases are just not going to allow for the long-term sustainability of this resource. And so absent some hydrology changes, the hydropower resource at both the upper basin and the lower basin generation resources is in absolutely trouble, and directly related to drought. And I think that I don't know where we go from there, but I think I'll leave it at that with the conversation.
Thanks, Jordy. I'll add two things. When you talked about impacts, talked about the mill levies for salinity. The mill levy in Arizona doesn't go to salinity, it goes to CAP repayment. So the taxpayers and the ratepayers of CAP are going to pay more money in that regard. And maybe in the best case scenario, knock wood, 27 and 28 calendar years, the reductions in the lower basin of Mexico are going to be double what they've been in the last couple of years. So there's going to be even less water going through the generators at Hoover. It is a difficult problem. Jordy's described it. Basically, they're the Fed's program to protect the power head and the infrastructure of Glen Canyon Dam is being done at the expense of Hoover, right? And Lake Mead. And, we've got James, 135 feet of water in Lake Mead or so that either we created from conservation or reductions. And just going down to 6 million acre feet this year is mining away, 30 feet of that? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna go, Jordy, to 1035. There's no question that that's gonna happen. And there is one alternative in the draft environmental impact statement put forth by a group of NGOs that the minimum release from Alameda is 4.5 million acre feet. So we'll see where the federal government comes out with operating plan for 2027 and beyond. Probably the final EIS in late June or so, we'll have a better idea about where Powell and me are going to be under that plan and Jordy further impacts to the power resources.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Any questions from folks around the table for Jordy? Gabe or folks online? Ed, did you want to add anything?
That was a really uplifting brief. I appreciate the information.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks, Tom. I just would add that the value of capacity is increasing, especially as data centers come online and as Arizona is moving into two different RTO, EDAM markets. So without that capacity, the average price for a megawatt of capacity is about 84 grand in CAISO for the year. So
Sorry, Ed, most people know who you are because you just
I'm sorry, sure. Ed
No
Garrick,
problem.
representing Irrigation Electrical District Association of Arizona.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Well, thanks everyone on this issue. I don't think you can describe uplifting in any way, shape, or form for my life the last 3 years. Item 8, 2026 wildfire outlook. Tiffany Davila, Public Affairs Officer from the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. Tiffany.
Thank you very much. All right, so for the 2026 fire season, we'll just go to the next slide. So first for 2025, we had about 1,600 wildfires last year, of which 331,000 acres burned. So the total number of fires was down by 26%. However, the acres burned jumped 17%. And that was primarily due to the Dragon Bravo fire. The Dragon Bravo fire consumed a high number of acres. Had that fire not been in existence, we would have been more in aligned with the lower below average number of fires, and then the acres would have matched. But because of Dragon Bravo, our total acres burned 70%. And we're talking numbers that are statewide, so not just state, but we're talking federal, tribal as well. So all of these are multi-jurisdictional. Next slide, please. So far this year, we've had about 300 fires. We've burned about 6,000 acres, and these numbers are from last week. 2025, 407 fires, 8,500 acres burned around the same time. We just finished, well, it's not finished, but we just came off of the Jones fire in Wickenburg that burned 84 acres in the river bottom. And then last week we had the Hazen fire in Buckeye that burned about 1,200 acres. And something to note with the Hazen fire, we don't typically see a large amount of acres burned on a river bottom fire in early May. We don't typically see a river bottom fire at 1,200 acres. Usually we do have a lot of river bottom fires in Avondale, Buckeye, Kearney, Wickenburg, but not really consuming that much vegetation at the start of May. Next slide, please. So for the seasonal outlook for May, above normal significant fire potential for southeastern Arizona. And what we're looking at is starting heavy activity in southeast Arizona and kind of making its way northward through central and up into northern Arizona. Again, you know, as with everyone that has presented today, we're talking the lack of precipitation, the drought conditions, the above average temperatures that we've experienced since December into January, February, and March. The long-term dryness, warmth, and drought capable of significant fire potential across the Sonora Desert and lower elevations where the grasses and fine fuels reside. And that's typical because of the vegetation type in southern Arizona with the grass and the brush. You know, we start to see most of our activity there. And then again, we start seeing the uptick as we move, you know, later into May and then into June. So for northern Arizona, again, the low snowpack and the drought conditions coupled with the tree mortality, and I'll show a map on that here shortly, and the stress in diverse forest types is where we're going to start to see across the Mogollon in Coconino. We could start seeing our activity pick up as we move later into May and early June. So we're looking at 30 days ahead of schedule, where we should be typically, if we had the precipitation, if we had the normal temperatures, we're seeing our activity where we should be now is what we would be seeing in June. Next slide, please. So again, tree mortality and drought stressed trees are going to be a factor this year. Dry conditions could be the catalyst for high fire activity. The concerns to the firefighter and the public, increased fuel loading and continuity. I don't know if you've driven across the state lately, but there's a lot of fuel loading in southern Arizona with the grass and the brush, in Chino Valley, in Prescott, across those areas as well. And then enhanced fire intensity and severity, the abundance of dead pinon, juniper, and oak trees and their debris contribute to hotter, more intense fires. We have a lot of down and dead vegetation across the Mogollon, meaning the vegetation's dead, it's laying there, it's a contributing factor to fires if sparks or some fire were to ignite in that fuel bed. Next slide, please. This is the map that shows the bark beetle infestation across the state. And it's not just impacting Arizona. We're coming across the Prescott, down into the Mogollon, into New Mexico, and then into Colorado as well. So it's impacting a number of states. That could be a driving factor for our fire season and our fire activity as well in those areas. Next slide, please. So again, the fuel conditions, getting back to that, greater potential for crown fire, again, because of those dead trees, the bark beetle infested trees. Crown fires where, I don't think I included a photo here, but if you watched any video from the Dragon Bravo fire, the crown fires when fire gets into the tops of the trees and spreads from tree to tree. And then the heavy grass crop in the Prescott and Chino Valley area. And then again, the grasses and brush in southern and southeastern Arizona. While we were all elated to see all of that moisture in September and October, then it kind of, the faucet turned off and we were dry. And while most people think, well, we had a lot of moisture in the fall, that should help you come fire season. It really doesn't, because we didn't see the continual moisture. We had a dry winter, we had a dry spring. And so that kind of just exasperated conditions. Yes, the precipitation was great to have in September and October, but we didn't have any follow through. And therefore we just went back to square one with the dry conditions. The drought has been a little bit better. However, there are still drought conditions statewide, which is also another factor that's playing into fire activity, fire behavior, and how the fire seasonal outlook will be. We look at the winter conditions, but then we have to start seeing what our spring outlook's gonna look like before we can actually pinpoint. And even at that, it's just a forecast, just like the weather's a forecast. We can't say we're gonna have a busy or not busy season. We really have to see what those driving factors are going to be leading up to, April, May, and June. Next slide, please. So again, just wanted to touch on our collaboration. Obviously, we're local, state, federal collaborators, tribal collaborators as well. We have all of our resources here. I know the feds have brought in some resources from out of state to help with their pre-positioning right now. Early preparedness and pre-positioning with engines and hand crew staging. Again, as we start to see an uptick in our activity, we'll start to pre-position our resources where we are seeing those higher risk areas. So again, we've had a lot of starts on the Tonto, our river bottom areas, the West Valley, and then southern Arizona. And then we're also, as I mentioned last year, I believe, we're part of the Great Plains Interstate Fire Compact. So that's a state-to-state agreement with the states that are in there. We can tap into their resources. We can bring engines here. We can bring overhead. We can bring hand crews. We've utilized Nevada for aircraft in the past. So we do have that at our fingertips as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so before I touch on a little bit of our new technology this year, I just wanted to say, as we're talking about the monsoon season, and I've mentioned this before, but wildfire season there's no start and end date like there is for monsoon season. We usually see our uptick in activity, again, depending on conditions, sometime late April, early May, and then as we move into monsoon season, if we do get an ample monsoon season, that's when we start to see our fire season kind of just go to bed, basically. But if we're talking about a monsoon season and a heavy monsoon season, what is that looking like? Is that going to be dry thunderstorms at first, followed by precipitation, or are we going to come in like gangbusters and have a really heavy monsoon season? If we see our monsoon season like we have in the past with basically just dry thunderstorms with no precipitation to back it up, that's when we'll see our fire activity just continue on throughout the summer. But if we get the heavy precipitation, that'll really put an end to our fire season. So that really, all of that comes into play as to when we'll see activity die down. So this year we have some new technology that I just wanted to touch on a little bit. Next slide, please. So we have new AI wildfire detection cameras. I'm sure some of you may have heard about these already in the news. This network kind of exists with the current APS system. So they kind of just roll in and meld good with all of the other cameras that APS has across the state. We have 7 cameras across the state. We put them, those are the areas: Sawmill, Blake Ranch, Whitman, Dudleyville, Foreman, Suffering Gulch, and Chiricahua. Those are really some of the areas that were overlooked. So we wanted to make sure we filled in the gaps there. And those are also areas that we've had high risk. We have high risk areas: Blake Ranch, Sawmill, we have Pine Lake in those areas. So we wanted to make sure we were tapping in and making sure we were covering, for us, the high risk areas of the state. So they're 24/7 cameras. They provide live feeds. They provide immediate smoke report notifications to our dispatch center. And those of us who are on the text notification, we get a push alert when there's smoke reported to the camera. And then we're able to get better eyes on the fire. It allows us to see where it is, what type of vegetation it's burning in, what resources we may or may not need. So we're not testing these, I'm sorry, they are in place. They just came online in March. So for this year will be our first time using these AI cameras. And then, like I said, the cameras integrate with the other AI systems across the state. Next slide, please. And then also we have a brand new dispatch center this year. So it took about a year to build the new dispatch center at 7,000 square feet. So a lot larger than our old dispatch center. I'm not sure if any of you have been to our old dispatch center, but it was definitely in need of updating, repairs. And so we just decided, let's start over. Let's get a new dispatch center built. Provides more square footage. We have, more technology in there. We're now able to see all of the screens and have real-time functioning capabilities for our dispatchers. So again, updated adequate facilities, state-of-the-art tracking for our wildfire tracking. And then the funding was provided through HB 2001 after the Telegraph fires. We were allocated $100 million to help with technology, equipment, fuels mitigation work, a lot of things in this package of HB 2001. So we were able to use the funding to build a new center, state-of-the-art center. It has a lot of great features that our other dispatch center didn't have. And so, we're happy to have this open and available for everybody. So next slide, please. And that is it.
All right, questions for Tiffany from folks around the table first, Mark?
Yes, Tiffany, I have a question about the resources. You mentioned the Great Plains Compact and the mutual aid. How many other states are involved in that? And are we prepared, because Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, we're a month ahead of schedule. They're more than a month ahead of schedule. We're going to overlap.
Yep.
I know we've run into this before where the resources get stretched. Are we prepared for this?
Yes, and that's a great question. So there's about, and I don't have the list in front of me, but I would say there's like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nevada. There's about 7 or 8 states in the compact already. And then I think Saskatchewan is also, there's a Canadian province in there too. So we do have the resources available. And as we start to get busier, we will start tapping in, if necessary, to that compact. And when those states are not busy, they will come assist us. So we get a lot of resources that aren't in the compact also. So we can tap into Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, California. And then obviously when they start getting busy, because they're on a different fire season than us, then they will go back and we will allocate our resources to help them. So yes, there are times when we are very busy, like 2020, when we had the bushfire going and the bighorn fire going all at the same time, where we were maxed out on our capabilities and our resources. But I wouldn't say that's typical, but as we start getting busy and those other states start getting busy, they have to start pulling back on their resources as well. But with the compact, that allows us to tap into more resources. North Dakota, South Dakota, they're not usually busy at this time of the year. So we're able to pull those resources to come here. We've used it in the past. We've used it last year and the year before. So we do have the capabilities. The Forest Service brings down resources. The BLM brings resources in from across the region. There's still resources around the East Coast that we can bring in: Florida, Georgia, Texas. They can all come here as well, so that we have the ability to have additional resources in the state when we need them.
I will just say that based on the weather forecast and the fuels forecasts, that there's an increased probability that things will get stretched thin and we will be having a lot of overlap with other states that are going to be in a similar situation.
Thank you. And we've already seen it with New Mexico. I mean, New Mexico started burning kind of early for them. They're seeing fire activity almost on a daily basis. And when I say fire activity, I mean large fires that are requiring a team. We've already sent resources to North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida and Texas this year, and that was early on. So, you know, if that's the sign of what's to come, then we'll be in for a busy season.
Other questions first from around the table for Tiffany? Gabe or folks online? Questions for Tiffany?
Leslie James has a question.
I'm good.
That's not a power issue though, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll go back to
Yeah.
that. And just on this agenda item, we'll go back, Leslie, I missed your hand when it went up on power, but I'm not hearing any. I did want to mention, kind of for the record, we talked a lot about kind of the macro level impacts, but Tiffany mentioned Kearney because of their water rights under the Grove Equity Decree. You know, they're going to have challenges meeting their demand later this summer. It's just a local impact that is real for people living there. Obviously, there are some different groups that are working with them to help them out and get them some water. But we do see those more local level. On the Colorado River next year, we're hearing from the town of Cave Creek. They're not going to be able to meet their demand with the reductions that are on the table in the post 2026 operations. Again, we've helped them take care of that problem with partnerships between Cave Creek and others. So these impacts are not just at the macro level. We're seeing impacts even in those two situations for people's homes, water to their homes. So this is, you know, a different world we're living in right now. So I missed Leslie James' hand popping up from CRETA, the hydropower issue. So Leslie, do you want to ask your question or make your comments now?
Sure, I appreciate that. If I could, though, I did want to just take off my CRETA hat and put on my personal hat and thank Tiffany for the DFFM folks. I worked with John Arona and others on a veg fire management plan for up in the Apache County area, Little Colorado area, and they've been nothing but completely professional, impeccable, and we're hoping to get it all done. So I wanted to thank you for that. So put my CRETA hat back on. I wanted to add in a little bit to Jordy's presentation. So I work with the Colorado River Storage Project. Jordy works with the Boulder Canyon Project. We always join forces, but we have really amped up our efforts to message and to educate and to talk about how this is Colorado River hydropower. This is an upper basin and lower basin. This is Colorado River system. And we have joint customers in both projects. So yes, they are different statutory authorizations. They are different rates. They are different contracts, but we are all one when it comes to Colorado River hydropower. I did want to make a comment, timely, I guess. Yesterday was the Glen Canyon Adaptive Management Federal Advisory Committee 4-hour meeting. The Department of the Interior is considering experiments this summer. One for a high flow experiment, which is intended to build beaches, help beaches. The other to address smallmouth bass. We've all talked about that. I just wanted to make a data point. If the department proceeds with I'll call it the cool mix alternative to address invasive species, you guys have heard and know about DROA and 6E, and particularly DROA sending water down to Glen Canyon to protect a minimum power pool. If that experiment proceeds, about half of that water is going to be bypassed. So here you have in a situation in this region where we all, SRP, everybody can use every kilowatt hour and every megawatt hour produced, especially to support grid operations, especially during extreme summer conditions, and especially during our continued transition to a different energy future where hydropower is so important. So we are strongly opposing any operations that will bypass. And I just wanted to let folks know that, you know, the Colorado River Storage Project hydropower serves about 5 million people. So, you know, Tom just talked about water impacts coming home to real people. These power impacts are the same, and water needs hydropower, and hydropower needs water. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Leslie. Now, if you could only get all 7 states to act as if the Colorado River system was a system, we might be in
Yes.
a lot better shape.
Yes, please. So let's please do that.
Can you tell me how?
I'll think about it. I'll get back to you
I'll
on
stop the
that.
editorial comments. Thanks, Leslie. I think we've worked through all our presentations, and we're on agenda item 9, the drought declaration recommendation. And I'm not going to belabor the points, but a quick summary. It's been drier and hotter in the near term, drier and hotter in the long term. Maybe a glimmer of hope with the building El Nino, but no certainty that that's going to help us in any way, shape, or form. Reservoir levels on Colorado River approaching very unhealthy levels. A little bit better on Salt River Project. I mentioned Kearney and the Gila River and San Carlos Lake being in bad shape. We heard about the high risk of fires. We heard about hydropower impacts in both Glen Canyon and Hoover Dam. We talked about Kearney and Cave Creek. So Gabe, I don't know if before I make a recommendation, you want to add anything into the summary. Hearing none, I will throw on the table for discussion that we make a recommendation to the governor to continue the drought declaration. Does anyone want to discuss that further? Anyone online?
No.
Does anybody think that that's not the right place to go?
I'll move your recommendation.
Thanks, Jordy. We don't kind of formally vote, but I appreciate that and your support. So we will, as we have in the past, have staff write up that letter transmitting that recommendation to the governor's office. Is there anything else then, Maggie?
No comments in the chat.
And we have call to the public as the last item, but we've kind of been doing it as we've gone along, and I always prefer that when we have a small enough group in the time. So with that, I appreciate, again, I get to sit here and listen to all the work that you've all been doing from the committee level. And I appreciate all of that. I know that's a lot more work than is just what's daylighting here in these meetings, and I appreciate everyone's efforts in that regard. And we will be back again here sometime in November of 2026 for our fall meeting. Maybe we'll see if El Nino's doing his or her job. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Charlie's retiring. I didn't think that would happen.
Yeah, he's been hinting at it for years, so we never knew when it was gonna
And
happen, but.
Tim's taken over then?
Well, I mean, he's been in Charlie's previous role.
He'd been in for 2 decades, manager of a group that drove.
Not me.
Reservoir operations,
You bet.
weather.
I know.
So Tim took over
Oh, yeah.
that role a few years ago,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Or-
And